Welcome back to WaveTalkers Live. This is episode number 105. This is our coffee bar episode. That means we're going to be taking questions today from our form. If you go to cq.wavetalkers.com/coffee bar, we will add them to the queue. You can also post them in the chat, and we'll do our best to pick those up. My name is Chris Mattia. My amateur radio call sign is Whiskey 6 Alpha Hotel. I'm joined today with my co-host David W0DHG and Dan NR6V. Scott KM6RFB is on assignment. He may be joining us periodically from time to time, but he'll be on the road. So with that, let's jump into today's Winlink check-in. David, you can pull you guys down. If you have access to Winlink, send in a Winlink check-in. Send it to all four of our call signs. They are W0DHG, NR6V, KM6RFB, W6AH, and our tactical address, which is WaveTalkers. In the comment section of that form, just go ahead and let us know what's your current radio-related passion project that you're working on. Let's go ahead and step through that process of sending in a Winlink check-in together. I'll switch over to my laptop here, and here I've already gotten a copy of Winlink up and running. We're going to come up here to the top and just go ahead and click on the little new message button, and it should open up a new message. Up near the top, you should see an option for select template. When you click on that, you can come up here to the top and it opens up your template manager. What you're going to do is click on the spot where it says standard templates. Just give that a click, that little plus, and it'll open up all of these different folders that have a variety of different forms in them. What you're looking for is the general forms section. Just go ahead and give that one a click. It should open up like this. There's a variety of forms in here. The one that you're looking for is down here near the bottom. It says Winlink check-in.txt. Just go ahead and give that a double click. Now, if the demo gods are with you, it should open up in your web browser of choice. On this page, what you want to do is you want to come up here to the date and time section. Just go ahead and give that a click. That's going to open up the it's going to open up a pull-down sheet here where it's going to set the current date and time from your computer and set it directly into the form. Go ahead and give that an OK. Next, you have the place to be able to put in all of the call signs. You just want to separate each of these with a semicolon. Our call signs are W0DHG, NR6V, KM6RFB, and W6AH. Our tactical address is WaveTalkers. Go ahead and put all of those in there. In the from field, you're going to enter in what your call sign is. Station contact is your name or your handle. The initial operators, this would be any additional operators that you have there watching the show with you. Thanks a lot for joining us. If you're joining us here in our live Zoom audience, then thanks a lot for joining us here. If you're joining us on YouTube or any of the other social media platforms, thanks a lot. If you find at any point during the show that you're enjoying what we're putting out here, be sure to like the video and leave us a comment. Let us know what you think about the show. Down here in the next section is the session. You want to let us know that this is an exercise. Then for the service, let us know whether or not you're connecting via amateur radio or the shares network. For the band, let us know if you're connecting via Telnet or the internet or any of the other various HF bands or VHF, UHF bands. For the session type, let us know how you're sending in that traffic, either packet, Telnet, PACTOR, RDOP, VAR, HF, VAR, FM, and so forth. For the location, just let us know the state that you're joining us from. That would be pretty helpful for us to be able to see. Your latitude and longitude should be either automatically filled in for you based on the grid square that you have, or it'll be set based on the GPS that you have connected to your computer. Down here is the comment section. This is where you want to let us know what your current radio-related passion project is. Down near the bottom, there's a submit button. Go ahead and give that a click. When you do, you'll get a couple of pop-ups here. You can just keep clicking OK until your screen goes blank, at which time you can simply close your browser, and you should see all of your form data filled in here. There's a post to outbox button here in the upper left-hand corner. Just go ahead and give that a click. At that point, you should see your outbox increment. Currently, I have 2 items in my outbox. You want to send that message by going up to the open session button. Make sure that you have the type of session that you're going to send your traffic in on. I'm going to use Telnet Winlink, use the internet. You hit open session, it springs open the little window, and go ahead and hit start, and it should go ahead and pass that traffic out. It looks like we have check-ins coming in from around the globe. Towards the end of the show, we will check back in here and we'll map all of these check-ins. And in the meantime, we'll go ahead and start downloading those. Let's jump into the slides and get into today's coffee bar. Whoops, didn't change over. There we go. All right, so today we're going to be doing the our coffee bar episode. If you're not familiar with these, we take questions via a form. The form is pretty simple to fill out. You go to cq.wavetalkers.com/coffee bar. You send in your questions. We can see them up here on our screens, and we will take them as they come in. But we have a few that we've already queued up here, and there's the link to our coffee bar submission. We also do keep track of these over the next several weeks until we do another coffee bar episode. So if we don't get to your question today, it's likely that we will answer it on the next coffee bar episode that we do. So let's get into our first question. It says, you have to choose one radio for all of your communications, MCOM, POTA, SOTA, which would be Parks on the Air, Summits on the Air, all of your different nets, etc. What is that radio and why? David, let's start with you to answer that question. What do you think?
Well, there goes my video. Should probably turn my video on. I'll start with that's what I should think. If I had to pick one, it's a challenging question, but probably would be my Yaesu FT991A.
Why would that be?
Well, you know, it's UHF, VHF, HF, it's all mode. It has a lot of flexibility. It's got a really nice waterfall display. It's fairly portable, and just would give me the most flexibility if I needed to do something MCOM wise, net wise. POTA SOTA, maybe not, but I think if I had to choose one from the collection that I have around here, that would be the radio I'd pick.
Nice. Dan, how about you?
I don't think I'm going to vary a whole lot from what David said, except for I think it would be the my Yaesu FT857 for much the same reasons. It's got 2-meter 440 HF. It has a data jack on the back and is quite easy to go from data modes to voice modes and back and forth. And it's nice and portable. Pretty energy efficient. So if I had to run off battery power, it would be pretty what's the word I'm looking for? Stingy on power draw. So I think that's where I'd go.
Nice. Excellent. Thanks a lot, Dan. So for me, let me bring myself back onto screen. We'll pull Dan off real quick. As soon as I finish clicking around, I see Scott has been able to join us. So for me, I actually have a similar answer as well. For me, it would be my ICOM 705. This is it's an all mode radio. It's QRP, so it's low power. So for most of the needs that I have, this is going to serve pretty much all of those. I can do all the HF work that I need to do, VHF, UHF. If you're doing things like shares or Mars, you can do the Mars mod on it. I have mine that's been modded, so I'm able to pass traffic with whichever mode that I need to when I'm operating with this radio, and it works extremely well for all of that. And a lot of people would kind of worry about whether or not I had the ability to do 100 watts. Well, I have an external 100-watt amplifier that I can plug into this radio. It's super flexible with that. The controls are here all on the side to be able to plug in the amp, to be able to plug in an external tuner into it. The connection for the antenna is BNC, so I've adapted all of my different radios and antennas to BNC. So I've standardized on just one system for doing that. I love the waterfall on it. It's got an excellent receive in it. So for me, this is kind of my go-to radio. I have it with me all the time, and it's one of those, if I had to give up all my other radios and only choose and only keep one, it's going to be my 705 as the one that I'm going to do. So that is that hopefully answers that question. That was from Kilo Charlie 3 Uniform X-Ray India. So again, if you have a question for us you'd like us to take, please go to cq.wavetalkers.com/coffee bar and we'll add it up into the queue. The next question that we have here is coming in from November 8, Juliet Lima Juliet. And Kathy asks, please discuss standardizing on SMA versus BNC. That is an absolutely great question. Most all of our HTs, when we get them, all have SMA connectors on it. And if you're working in a lot of the higher frequencies, then SMA connection makes a lot of sense. You find this connection on a lot of the different radios that we get. And I'm going to bring up two of my radios here real quick that I have. I have my Kenwood D74 and I have my Quansheng radio. So if you look at these two different radios and you kind of look really closely on the Kenwood radio, it's the female version of the SMA connector that's here. On the Quansheng and a lot of the lower cost radios that you find, you have the male version of the SMA connector that's on your radio. One of the drawbacks to having the SMA connector on here is the antenna connections themselves, the ports are really tiny. The threads are really small. It's very easy to cross thread these. The pins are much smaller, so it's pretty easy to be able to bend and damage the pins. If you're talking about one of the low-cost radios, then many of those it's not worth just worrying about because they're usually about $20 or $30. They're pretty easy to be able to replace. But if you've got any of your radios like the Kenwoods, the Yaesus, the Icoms, any of the more name brand ones, these are a lot more expensive. And so having to, if you damage the connector, it's a much bigger issue. The other problem that I've run into is oftentimes when I'm doing MCOM sorts of work, I find that I'm quickly changing my antenna on a pretty regular basis. So I'll go from, say, the stock rubber duck antenna to maybe an external antenna that I've gotten a little bit longer whip, one of the either one of the diamonds or so forth, and I end up changing those off. Oftentimes, if I'm doing MCOM work, I'll use a roll-up Slim Jim, an external antenna, which is going to be something like an N9TAX or an Ed Fong antenna. And so I'm constantly taking the antenna off and changing it. When you're doing that, you're doing a lot of changing of the antenna and putting a lot more stress on this little small SMA connector. Each time you do that, you're putting stress on the circuit board and the circuit connections inside. These are all pretty well made, but that is a point of failure that you may have. It would be easy to cross-thread them. So what I've gone to doing is I've taken pretty much all of my radios at this point, and I've switched them all over to BNC. You can pick up these small BNC adapters for just a few dollars. Depending on where you get them, they can be anywhere from just $2 or $3 or about $5 up to about $15 or $16. You buy it one time, and they just you can get them in either the male or the female version, and you can just screw them into the radio itself. So you make that connection one time, you make sure it's nice and snug, and then any of your various different antennas that you have, for instance, I have this one is already plugged in here. Once you make the connection on there, it's very easy to change your antenna from one radio to another if you get the BNC adapter that's on there. So this is a signal stick radio antenna. These are excellent antennas that are there. I just picked up several of these from the folks at Signal Stick. They do a really nice job with their antennas. One of the things I like about them is you can kind of roll them up, and they can pack away pretty small, and then you can extend them out. They have really good range and quality on them. And then what I typically will do is I'll put an adapter for all of my existing antennas that I have that has the correct SMA adapter, and then it goes into the BNC. So it makes it very easy to change an antenna from one radio to another. It's a more robust port. You can also order these adapters and get the little collar. It's basically a little O-ring that goes on the bottom, because some of the adapters will sit proud of the radio quite a bit, and so you can get this little ring adapter. It's basically just a little rubber gasket that sits on top and makes the connection a little bit cleaner. So I've adapted all of my HTs over to this format. Now, the other place where this comes into play is if you end up supporting MCOM work and you end up supporting an agency, and they're going to be mostly using a commercial radio, oftentimes something like the APX 8000 or something like that. And the antennas on those are interchangeable. And if you pull this thing off, you can notice that they're using the SMA adapter as well. The radio itself has the SMA male adapter on it, very similar to all of the low-cost radios that are out there, and the antennas are set up in the same way. For these radios, I've done a couple of exercises where the thing that actually saved us on the exercise was being able to use a roll-up Slim Jim antenna to increase the gain on one of these antennas. Maybe we were inside of a building and we needed to be able to get the signal outside. And so we had to adapt that N9TAX or the Ed Fong antenna over to this. Well, if you've got the BNC and you have a set of these adapters, these BNC adapters, you can just screw that into the radio, and then you can adapt the antenna to whatever you need. And so this is it ends up being a really nice way of being able to deal with all of your equipment. For me, I also do a lot of portable operating. And so, for instance, like my 705, that already has BNC on it. I have a lot of buddy pole equipment. All the buddy pole gear all has BNC adapters on it. So it gave me a way to standardize across my HF, VHF, UHF, ham, and commercial support that I do. So with one connector, that has seemed to make a lot of difference for being able to do that. So that would be my thought. It's not the SMA is not a bad connector. It just is not quite as robust and as quick to be able to change over an antenna as what the BNC adapters are.
Another thing to point out on that, the rating on the SMA connectors it's a much lower number of connect-disconnect than the BNC is rated for. So if you think you're going to be taking your antennas on and off a lot, you'll definitely want to like upgrade and standardize, like Chris has done, to that BNC connector, because over time the SMA connector is going to wear out. It's rated for a much lower number of connect and disconnects.
Chris mentioned the putting the spacer in there. That's more than just a cosmetic reason for doing that. Is particularly if you put a larger antenna on there, you're putting a lot of stress on that connector, and often internally those connectors are directly soldered to the main board, and if there's movement or ability to be movement in the connector, it's not at all uncommon to break a connection onto that main board, and that is an expensive repair. So if you do use an adapter, or in any case if you're using a large antenna on there, make sure it's supported well, and that the case itself is supporting the antenna, not just the connector.
Hey guys, how you doing? This is Scott.
Oh, hey Scott, there he is. He has made it. Let me bring him up to screen as well. There he is.
Hey, so good thoughts on the antennas, and and just keep in mind the antenna is not a handle, and I know a lot of people like to grab the antenna when they grab their radio, and that can create a lot of problems for you. For an example, the BK radios, the Bindex Kings that are used in public safety, they are case-mounted antenna mounts, and they have a wire that runs from the bottom of it to the circuit board. And I can't tell you how many times I've seen those get broken, or like Dan said, if people over tighten, like with the SMA, you can actually turn that connector on the case mount and you can actually break that connection. And so by having that BNC style adapter, it prevents you from over tightening the actual antenna onto the radio. And it gives it a little bit more robustness as far as if you do on occasion grab it from the antenna, that could create some issues for you.
You know, Scott, when we went and did a couple of the exercises that we've worked on with some of the various different agencies, one of the things that I noted when we would get the radios back, a lot of the folks were taking the microphone, because they had the external microphone, and they were clipping it onto the antenna, and that's how they would bring it back, because it keeps it as kind of one nice clean package to be able to handle it. And overall, that was one of my impressions that I kept thinking, is like, wow, this is really putting a lot of stress on that connector. Now, the commercial radios do have a lot more of a robust connection point, where the default antenna that comes with that rubber duck really has a good connection onto the body, but it still seems like it's putting a lot more stress onto that.
Absolutely. And just to pair it with what Chris and Dan and everybody else has said, and Dave, I've gone to the point where I am now changing out all my connectors to BNC, because it adds it just makes it a little bit more robust. And David said it quite well. Those SMA connectors have a certain limited number of turns on them before they'll lace themselves out. So just keep that in mind when working with antennas. And it also standardizes what you have to carry out in the field as far as adapters and things like that.
You know, when I was a brand new ham and I got my first HT, and I went into one of the ham radio shops, and I was like, hey, I've got this radio now, and I'd like to be able to use it in my vehicle, put it on an external antenna. And they asked me a bunch of questions like, well, was I ever going to go up to a mobile radio or this, that, or the other? I had no idea as a new ham whether I would do any of those things or not. But I knew I had the antenna I knew I had the radio that I had, and I wanted to be able to connect it. So I ended up putting an external mount on my vehicle and ran the cabling all the way through, and it has a little SMA connector. And that was fine when I was just connecting that one HT and using it in my vehicle. But then as I later on got a mobile radio and I would swap out various different ones, that SMA connector has been a real pain for me. Because I've not been able to switch it out on various different things. So I've ended up adapting even that one onto a BNC as well at this point. So
yeah, and if I can throw my 2 cents worth in on the last question, I use, if I was to choose a radio, on my FT897 with an LGG tuner strapped to the side of it.
Right. And a similar kind of thing. Finding those all mode radios all band radios are really tricky these days. So thanks a lot for that, Scott. We will we'll move on now onto the next question. While I've got it up there, I'll bring up that question submission form. If folks want to see it again, it's cq.wavetalkers.com/coffee bar. And let's go on to the next one. So the next question comes in from Terry Z01HOG. He says, I have Winlink running on my 7300. Great. But the problem I'm having is with my IC705. I cannot make the connection on VHF, UHF, or HF with it. When I click on start, the rig goes into transmit, but there's no modulation of the signal. Well, I have a Icom 705. I use this all the time. Love the radio. It is absolutely, it's an absolutely excellent radio. a couple of things come to mind. The first thing is check and make sure that you're not using the pre-built FT8 setting. And you get to that by going to the menu. You go over to the second page, and there's these presets that are in here. Tap on that preset. You'll notice that there's a normal mode and FT8, and I've even added a preset for Winlink specifically. The FT8 mode works really good for FT8, but it doesn't work as good for Winlink when you're trying to pass traffic. There's a slight different setting that's inside of the radio to make that work.
Hey, I gotta run, Chris. The flight just landed.
Okay, thanks, Scott.
Bye.
Yep. So if you go back to the menu and you go into set, the other places to look off of the standard settings, if it is an internal setting, you would go into the connectors section, and a couple of things to check. First of all, check the CIV or CI5. You want to make sure that your echo back is turned off. CIV transceive and your address should be back to their defaults. Let me go back another level. USB function. This is one that you want to check and make sure your USB function is set to DV data. So you're going to push that data out of there. And that's most of the settings that you got to make sure that you've got on the 705. Obviously, you want to make sure that if you're doing VHF, UHF, you're just in the FM mode. If you're on HF, you're going to be doing upper sideband, especially if you change over to, say, the 40-meter band or any of the lower bands that are on there. Keep an eye on your transmit up here, making sure that you're always in the right mode. If you're doing VHF, UHF, make sure it sets it back to FM. And if you're on any of the HF bands, make sure it's always in upper sideband. Those are kind of the settings on the radio itself. However, that's rarely what I have found to be the problem. The problem usually stems from your USB connection. Now, I've updated mine. I have the USB-C port on here. I updated this entire board inside of my radio. It works great. Love that board. The problem that I've seen with the 705 with the transmitting is RFI getting into the connectors from the computer. So, for instance, I use these little adapters. Oftentimes, it's just got a USB-C on one end and then either a USB-A on the other, and load these things up with as many ferrites as you can fit on them, because more than likely what you're getting is you're getting a little RFI. The cables that I have found that work the absolute best are the cables that they sell through DigiRig. And these, they have the USB-C on both ends of them, or they've got USB-C and USB-A on them. You can pick these up. I think they also have a USB micro cable, which is the one that the original port that comes on the 705 is. The most common problem that I've found with doing digital and not getting traffic to go out has been that USB cable. Not all cables are created equal. You want a short cable, as short as you can get it, and you definitely want them loaded up with ferrites. The USB A to USB micro cable that I used until I upgraded the board in this thing has 3 ferrites on one end, 2 ferrites on the other end of it. And it took me a while to find a cable that would actually work with my 705. I went through a lot of different cables that I had in the collection of cables that I had, and many of them just flat out would fail in that way that you're describing, where they just wouldn't transmit. Usually what was happening, as soon as it would start to transmit, you would get all this noise that would come back through the radio. And a lot of that, for instance, my Microsoft Surface is really bad about pushing RFI out of its USB-C port and pushing it back into the radio and causing issues. So a lot of it is coming through the various different computers that you might have. It could just be picking up and using these cables as an antenna. These ones that DigiRig sells that have these ferrites built in, they're nice and short. They're really well shielded, and these work excellent. So that would be my guess as the places to look. A couple of setting changes to check inside of the radio itself. Make sure you're always in the right mode. And then more than likely, it is the USB-C, the USB cable that you're working with. Definitely as many ferrites as you can get. load up on that thing. And oftentimes, if you put the ferrites on, you can start to see, as you keep snapping ones on, you'll see the signal kind of get a little bit cleaner each time. One of the ways that I do that is I'll take and press the button here, go into the RF gain, turn that RF gain up quite a bit, so you're seeing a little more until you get just to the point where you're seeing quite a bit of noise turn it down a little bit, so that your noise kind of disappears a little bit. And then when you can put it on transmit, you'll see the noise kind of jump in here as soon as you plug it into your computer. And then you can start clipping those ferrites on, and you'll see that noise floor just drop right off, oftentimes. And that's oftentimes the thing that's given me the most grief. So with that, let's jump over to the next question. Here's that submission. I see we've got a couple more that have come into the forum. So thanks, folks, for sending those in. cq.wavetalkers.com/coffeebar is the link to be able to send in some more questions to us. The next question here comes in from KN6LOA, and she asks, I have the GPS USB dongle that you recommended. However, I'm having problems to get it to work. Can you please help? David, do you want to talk about this a little bit and kind of walk us through how she might be able to get that figured out?
Yeah, I'm going to certainly try. I'm going to show you some stuff here on my client machine. Let's see if I can get that shared out. If you can see my client machine here, I do have one of the many GPS dongles that we suggest. And what I'm going to say is, start looking, and this is Windows 10, so maybe Windows 10 or Windows 11. It's going to be slightly different. Start looking at in the control panel. In your control panel, you'll have an item that's devices and printers. And it's going to show up simply as a USB serial device. And you can see this one showing up as COM5. The thing about these USB GPS dongles, often they don't have a lot of information or data that will show up other than it's there. I know it's there because when we get into my Winlink, you'll see that it is set up as the COM5. So you're looking to see if there's a device here. You may want to remove it and reinstall it. You can also go look in your device manager. I have the device manager pulled up here, and in my ports, COM and printer ports, I see, look, there's the USB serial device. And you can look in here, open this up. It will say it's working properly. It'll tell you the communication speeds, and you can adjust those, but I don't recommend doing it. You can try to update drivers if and only if you see like a little yellow question mark, which means it's not properly installed. You can get some information about it or any events to see whether it's working or it's not working. Anyhow, I'm going to jump into my Winlink client here. And hope it loads. There it goes. And what you'll see is you've got the cross here, and it starts off red because it doesn't have access to it right away, and then it goes green. Green means it's set up right. And if you have questions about it or what's not set up right, you can click on it, and it'll bring up the GPS and position report information. And right here, it's going to go right into what's the serial port. And as you can see, it found it because I've used it before, and it's set for COM5. As well as the port speed. And again, in the device manager, you can adjust that as needed. You might want to go into yours. If you see the device in the device manager and it shows up with a COM port, it may have picked a different COM port here. Pull this down and see if you can find a port that shows up. You'll also have data showing here. It'll suggest or provide information about what it's receiving on its pole and its status. That would be where I would start and look at it. If you're not sure if it sees it or if it's plugged in, I'm getting feedback from somebody. What you can do in your device manager is, if I can spell it right, pull your device manager up if it's plugged in, open up the ports, bring the whole unit up, and then unplug it and see what goes away. If something goes away, plug it back in, see what reappears. That's the device you're looking for, and see what's in there. And then you can go into that device and see if it needs a driver update. You may try removing it and then plugging it back in and letting it reinstall.
David, when this question came up, I went to check mine because I have one plugged into my client here, and I noticed that it had not connected in a long time. And so I looked and all my connections appeared to be good. So I moved from one USB to another because I had it plugged into a USB hub, and it immediately found the new COM port, and I changed that in the Winlink software, as you can see here on my screen. And it took a very long time to find the satellite. Now, we are in the middle of a solar storm, and what I'm finding is that even though it right now is connected, it periodically will go searching for satellites. And that may just be today because of the solar storm going on. We're supposed to get hit pretty hard again this afternoon. Right now it's stable, but for a long time it was going back between being linked and searching for satellites. So that could be a temporary problem. That obviously would not be an ongoing issue.
Yeah, right now might not be a day that I would want to spend a ton of time troubleshooting. Again, because what Dan said, the solar activity right now, the solar storm, definitely could potentially be causing some conflict or some interference. The other tool that I'll use to troubleshoot this a little bit too is this pinpoint APRS. It's useful for looking to see, hey, is your GPS connected or disconnected? And then again, you can go through the options, look at it. Again, we're looking at what it's set up through Speedwise. This will find it just as easily, and you can see whether it connects up to it or it doesn't. So that's it. Hopefully that helped.
Thanks,
and
David.
Make sure too that antenna is outside or as close to a window as you possibly can get, because it does need to get a signal for it to properly get data. I have mine. It's sitting in a window. The window is facing to the west, and I seem to get a pretty good signal there. Again, your mileage may vary, but you'll want to get it outside or as close to outside as you possibly can.
As I think about using those GPS dongles, one of the things that I have a challenge with, I can't demonstrate it here at the house very well because my house has got stucco on it, which means it has that chicken wire underneath of the stucco. So basically I live inside of a Faraday cage. And so my GPS dongles really do not work very well at all. I'll oftentimes have to suction cup them to the window, and then the window to my studio backs up very closely to the house next door to me. So there's just a very narrow space where it's getting any kind of a signal at all. And so I have a really hard time actually getting a signal and locking in, even though I've got it connected, I've got it plugged in, everything is tied in really well. It just never seems to work very well for me. But once I take it outside, bam, it connects right away, and everything is working great. So I'll oftentimes, if I need to test mine, I'll take it outside, set up in the backyard, and check and make sure that everything is plugged in and working. So thanks a lot for walking us through that, David. Really good. Hopefully that helps you, Carolyn, to get that back up and running. So here's a submission form again, cq.wavetalkers.com/coffee bar. And the next question that's come in, and this is one that just came in, and it says, do you use Winlink Express only? I've experimented with PAT and Winlink on Android, and find Winlink on Android almost perfect for portable, lightweight operation. There's also Radio Mail, which is available on iOS. This came in from Kilo Bravo to Hotel Sierra Hotel. For me, if I'm just sending traffic and I'm just sending Winlink messages, regular Winlink email messages, then any of the different programs tend to work just fine, whether it be PAT or Winlink on Android, Radio Mail, any of those seem to work just fine. The challenge oftentimes comes out is if you're doing anything where you're doing MCOM work and you're having to pass form data so that it is compatible with all of the traffic. A really common thing that we run into at the end of every single episode that we do, we bring up the map that shows where everybody is sending in their check-ins. And invariably, we'll get a check-in from somebody and we'll get a follow-up email later on saying, hey, I sent in my Winlink check-in and I didn't show up on the map. And I'm like, well, what did you use to send in your check-in? Almost always it's PAT, it's Winlink on Android or one of the other sources that are out there, Airmail or some of those other ones. And the challenge is that if you're passing Winlink traffic in an MCOM situation, you really want to use the built-in forms because they're all tied together and they all are integrated together. Winlink Express is really the only one that does that kind of perfectly to be able to do that. And I know somebody's going to say, hey, but what about Radio Mail? So Radio Mail is a great tool for being able to use your iOS device and send that traffic in where it's connected into your iPhone or your iPad. And they do have forms, and many of those forms are compatible. The problem is you can either send that traffic via Telnet. You can do it via packet now. There are some different packet protocols. So if you can get into a packet gateway, oftentimes you can get that traffic to go through. If you're trying to do VARA, either VARA FM or VARA HF, then what you're going to need is you're going to need a Winlink machine, a Windows machine that's connected to the radio that's got VARA running on it, and then be able to pass that traffic into the Windows PC that then is what's connected to VARA and connected onto your radio to be able to send it. So while it will work, and there are ways to be able to do it, those little B-Link PCs run on 12 volts, so it is possible to create a little small portable Winlink station that you can have maybe in a backpack, or you can set up at the location and use the handheld to be able to walk around and relay the traffic essentially through that gateway. None of those are really a great option still at this time if you're doing specifically MCOM work, where you're working with an agency, you're having to send in, say, ICS forms. The data will still go through. It's just not going to map. It's not going to come in all of the same format. So it requires the operators on the other side to do a little more heavy lifting to figure out how to make sure that they've not missed your traffic, to make sure that it's integrated with the overall data set. So do all of those other options work? Yeah, they all work for being able to send Winlink traffic. And if you're not doing Winlink MCOM work specifically, then they're all pretty much fine, because what you're doing there is you're sending Winlink traffic, you're sending emails, maybe to an out-of-area contact or something, communicating individually with folks. So that would be the caveat that I would add on to it. David, Dan, do you guys have anything you want to add on to that?
The recent publishing of Radio Mail for the iPhone does give you the ability to use the Winlink forms. It is a subscription thing. You do have to pay on a yearly basis. I guess it just depends on like what's the goal. If you're just sending email, it's just Winlink email, then the other tools will work sufficiently. But again, as Chris pointed out, if you're, supporting an agency and they're in need of the forms, then, the way to be a service for them is to use the tools that will work. And, the tools that work are Winlink Express with the form packet, and the other ones it doesn't make it all the way there. So my 2 cents.
Yeah. Dan, did you have anything you wanted to jump in with?
Not really. I think the compatibility is the key, and just like our MCOM groups have not gone with DMR or any of the other digital formats because they're just not universal enough. And the one thing about Winlink is it works with everybody that has Winlink.
Excellent. All right, let's move on to the next question then. Again, if you've got access to the internet, go ahead and send in Send in your question. Also put it in the chat if it's available to you. If you're either on YouTube or if you're on inside of the Zoom here, go ahead and let us know if you've got a question for there. We'll try and get that added in. The next question that comes in, this one also comes from November 7, Juliet Lima Juliet, and she asks, how do I send multiple pages of an ICS 214 in Winlink? And that is an unbelievably great question. So a few weeks ago, we David and I went out and we did an exercise. One of the tools that we've been using, I like to call it my shared 214 or my online 214 form. And it actually uses a Google form. We'll step through what that looks like here in just a second. The problem comes in with Winlink, and let me see if I can bring up my Winlink station here again so we can kind of see where this is really an issue. So here inside of Winlink, if I bring up a new message, and I go up to select template, we can come down here to the standard templates. We'll go ahead and click the plus next to that. And we'll come down here to the ICS USA forms. This is the incident command system forms. We'll come down here, we'll open it up. And here is the ICS 214 activity log and the 214A individual activity log. I'll go ahead and open up the individual activity log. It's a little more straightforward. So this is one where you're going to come in, you're going to put the incident name, the information about the operational period. There is an option here for page and page number. And so the initial thought is like, well, this is going to just totally do all this for me. It's going to be absolutely no problem. I'm going to be able to put page, 1 and it'll just figure it out. Unfortunately, it doesn't. You put in the date and time and you put in the major event or the activity that you're doing. You come down to the bottom and there's a prepared by and there's a little form submission. The problem is this table only has so many rows in it of data. And once you exceed that number of rows, then you have to submit the form. You have to come back in here and you have to fill out another copy of the form. And then you manually type in page 2. Now, if you're just having this page open while you're operating, while you're doing your exercise, while you're doing the activation, and you're live filling this out and making posts, it's not such a big deal because you can then go ahead and just submit the form. The problem ends up being is that your Winlink station is sitting here with this opened up in your browser. You've got other traffic that you're sending perhaps on your Winlink station, and being able to make sure you don't close your browser out, delete the form online, and any of those kind of issues can be a real challenge for being able to do that. So here's what I've come up with as kind of the best solution for doing this. And I'll switch over to another machine here. What I like to do is I create a Google form, and I'll open up my Google Drive, and I'll come over here to new, and I'm going to go down here to the Google Forms section. And what I do with that is I come up here, it just gives you a form that looks like this, and I'll just call this my ICS 214. And this is going to be for W6AH. So I'll go ahead and do that. I'll click here in the top, and that'll automatically save the name of this file for me, and it's got everything kind of loaded in. I can give it a description, but mostly all I really care about is the notable activity. I only need really one field in here at this point, and instead of being a multiple choice question, I'm going to say it's going to be a paragraph that'll allow me to type in more information into this form. Now, if I'm going and I'm doing an exercise or something, I may add a couple of additional fields on here. So for instance, if I'm going on an exercise, I might add click the little plus here, and I might add a field for expenses. It'd be dangerous if I could type. There we go, expenses. and leave that as a short answer as well. So I could go in and I could type in, like if I could go ahead and take a picture, I could type in what the value of my, breakfast was that I need to be reimbursed for. I could also do a field here for mileage. Another thing that I'll oftentimes add for that, I'll click the little plus sign down here, and instead of multiple choice, I'll come in here and I'll say file upload, and I'll allow it to be able to make it so that I can put a picture of maybe my receipt or what have you in here. But that's if you're kind of getting in there and you're trying to use this as a general record keeping. I'm going to go ahead and close. I'm going to delete each of these different items here. So I just have my notable activity because that's what you really want on a 214. I'm going to come over here to responses then, and you can see there's an option here at the top for link to sheet. So go ahead and click on that. And what it's going to do is it's going to automatically create a new sheet for me, and it's going to call it the same thing that I just named it. So ICS 214 and my call sign, and I'm going to go ahead and say create. And what that's going to do is it's going to create that sheet for me. And you can see there's even an option here that says view in sheets. If I click on that, you can see it opens up a new tab and it gives me a spreadsheet that's going to create. Let me go ahead and zoom in a little bit so that it's a little bit easier to be able to see this. I'll maybe zoom into 200%, makes it nice and big for folks to see. And it's created two fields. Now notice I didn't create a timestamp option, but it did create that notable activity. So let me show you how I use this. I'll come over here, I'll come back to the form, and I'll just go up here to send, and I'm going to click on the little link form, and it's got the form here. I'll click shortened URL so it's a little shorter, and I'll just copy that URL. I'll then go into my phone, for instance. Just give me a second to make sure that it's up. And we'll bring that up on the overhead cam. So I've just opened up my phone. I've opened up my web browser, and I can just come up here to the top and I'll paste, and it pastes in that field directly from my laptop. This is just using one of the shared fields here. Let me say yes and go ahead and sign myself in to my account. There we go. So what it does is it brings up the form on my phone. Let me drop the brightness down so it's a little bit easier to see this on the overhead. So it brings up the form here on my phone, and I could just come in here, notable activity, and just say arrived, maybe, and hit the submit button. Now, when I do, what that does is that automatically creates a new entry directly here into this form. And each time I submit a new entry, it will automatically create the entry. It'll time and date stamp it in here. As a matter of fact, I can even come back over here onto my phone. I can hit submit a new form, and it brings the form back up. This is a cool thing that will work on your phones because a lot of the phones have text to speech. So you can click inside of the notable form field. You can hit the little microphone. Incident commander asked for our 214 forms. You can just speak into it. Nope, let me delete that part. You don't have to see, you have to speak right into it. And it'll type there for you. So it ends up being a very fast way to be able to keep your log. I'll go ahead and submit. And as soon as I submit, you can see that that data just enters right here into this form. Now, when you're all finished, you can take this form and you can go up to the file menu and you can say download. And the format that you want to download this in is this tabbed separated values.tsv. You download this to your Winlink station, and you can then import that. You'll need to change the .tsv on your Winlink station. Just change it to .txt, and then you can import that into the Winlink form. That's going to be over here down at the bottom. If I take myself off, if we scroll down, here it is, load all ICS 214A data. And if you click on that, what it's going to do is it's going to ask you for that text log. So this is one that I did from earlier. I can go ahead and click on it, actually double click it, And it should just go ahead and import all of those data. It pulls in the date and time information. It pulls in all of the data that you had entered into that 214 log, and it fills it in. Now, as long as you don't go beyond the bottom here, it'll just pull all of that data in, and you can submit it. If you have more data that you need to fill in here, you can just go in and edit the text file and just separate it out into two text files, and you can then import the second one in. It ends up being a nice and easy way to be able to do that. A couple of caveats to be aware of when you're doing this. First of all, when I've run through this process a few times, I've discovered that inside of the Google form, when you're filling that out, if you use any punctuation at all, or if you put line breaks in, it breaks the import. It doesn't work when it imports. So don't put any punctuation in, no special characters, no apostrophes, don't even put a period in or a comma. Just type in the text and just import it straight in. Your text and your descriptions of those major events or those notable events should be pretty short anyway when you're doing it. That's really the biggest gotcha. What's nice about doing this is when you fill in the top portion of this form and you go to type it in again, you'll notice that because this is inside of your web browsers will go ahead and they'll remember the form data that was filled in previously into these fields. So it ends up being very quick to be able to come down here. So for instance, individual name, when I click on it, it has my name already populated. So page 2, page 3 that you go to fill out and submit ends up being much faster to do when you're using this method. So that would be our suggestion as a way to be able to get around this. If you're on an incident where you're completely don't have access to the internet and the Google form is not going to work for you, just create a local spreadsheet and keep the data there in the spreadsheet. The format would all be exactly the same. You can note all of that information down and then import it afterwards directly into your 214 form. So that's, let me go back to the slides.
Chris, so if I understand it right, though, whoever you're sending this to, assuming you have multiple pages, is going to get separate emails.
Yes.
For each of those pages. So they're going to have to assemble the multiple pages on their end.
Yeah. So what I did to be able to deal with that, that's a great point, Dan. What I did to be able to deal with that, and this is a trick that I've been using within Winlink for a while now. Let me jump back over to this. Let me pull you down here for a second, Dan. Because that is an excellent point. Is this going to let me do this? Yeah, there we go. Remove spotlight. Okay, so I'm back here to the Winlink station. So I'm back here in my Winlink station. One of the things that I've done is under settings, if you go into the Winlink Express setup, you can create a tactical address. So one of the challenges that you've got is being able to send a Winlink message to yourself. And one workaround for that is you compose the message, you build the form, and then when it's in your outbox, I'll do it with one of these messages here. When it's in the outbox, what you can do is you can take the message and you can come up here to saved items. You can move it to another folder. Then you can open the message up. You can open that form and you can get the clean version of the form that's all printed out. You can open it up and you can print it out to a PDF file and have them one after another and then collate them all together. The other way you can do it is if you go up to settings and you go into Winlink Express setup, you can create a tactical address. And once you have your own like kind of personal tactical address, this is a sneaky way to be able to do this. When you create your message, who you're going to send that form to, you can click the drop-down menu and you can send it from your tactical address. So in this case, I would send it from WaveTalkers, and you can send it to your local address. So if I send it to W6AH and I'll say send pizza, and then just do test down here. I'll post that to the outbox and then open the session, start it, And it should just take a second for the Winlink traffic to come through. We'll see, did it make it out? It's gonna have to, I'm gonna have to do this 2 times. Once to send it out into the world, and then once to bring it back in.
You know, while you're going through the cycle, Chris, remember, if you're going to use this to send to yourself, you might want to code the subject with a special header so it makes it easier for you to filter it out.
Right.
Right. And there's some stuff in the chat too about, you know, the solution with the forms you build, like our internet based. You know, the reality is we were doing 214s on paper before we were doing them in spreadsheets, and before we were doing it in Winlink. A lot of times you're filing that 214 at the end of an operational period or at the end of a deployment. And, you know, if you're putting it on paper, you're saving it in a spreadsheet on a local computer, given that you have power, putting that form together at the end is quick and easy to do, without having to worry about, you know, is the internet there or not? Doing it the way Chris showed it. And I've used the tool Chris has provided a number of times because it's effective and it's useful and very helpful. And because we had internet, but I could have done it a different way. I could have been, you know, saving it on a notepad on my phone, or had a spreadsheet open, you know, again on my phone or on a PC, and just dumped that in there at any time, and then built it all up at the same time, so that when you get to, you know, over the 15 or 18 lines that a single 214 has, you can roll it on to the next one when you're compiling it all at the end. And it also makes you think about being a little bit more tactical in terms of the lines and the information that you provide in a single report. It may not be as useful to put every single line, you know, if you get to the end of the day and you've got 50 lines of information to put on your 214. Well, maybe every one of those are important moments in an event, but maybe not. And maybe something to think about. Or maybe some of them are a cascade of an event that's all tied to itself. So maybe you only put the first one, or maybe you just put the first instance of what happened and then just expand on that single line to say, oh yes, this happened a number of times throughout the day.
Lots of options there. Anyway, that hopefully that gives you a good sense as to how that 214 can be done. Currently, the way that Winlink is set up, you really do have to submit an additional form once you go past the single numbers of line items that are there in the form. So just something to be aware of. When we did the exercise, it was something that I ran into certainly every day, because we were logging lots of data into our 214 form, and suddenly we ran into a lot of different issues. So there we go.
Chris, couldn't you also do it where you create you just create a 214 spreadsheet and attach that to a general message as a CSV attachment?
Yeah, absolutely. That would be another way to be able to do it. If folks want the official form and they want all of the data on it, then you need to be able to push that data into the form. I have tried doing this into the form that you download from FEMA, the PDF form. It absolutely does not work to be able to import that data. The Winlink form does have that import feature. You have to import it as a tab delimited file. You can't bring it in as a CSV. That's just kind of hard coded in there. And so you have to know in the Google form to be able to export it in that tab separated format, and then change the file extension, because Winlink again won't bring in that tab separated file extension, that TSV. It will only bring in a file that's called that has a file extension of .txt, and it'll only read that file if it is a tab separated. It won't read it as a comma separated. So a couple of little gotchas there, but as long as you know what those are, it's pretty easy to work around it. Hey, let's move on to the next question. The next question is from a Golf Zero Tango Radio Tango. They say, by far, the hardest part of building a Winlink gateway seems to be the power supply system that enables prolonged operation once the domestic power system is no longer available. Can WaveTalkers run through the approaches and architectures, including power equipment with AC and DC from batteries, solar generators, etc., assuming you haven't already covered it. So we did go through this in several different episodes. Episode 57 was our first kickoff of the new Winlink server, Winlink gateway series. But let's walk through that just a little bit here. So this is your kind of a high level view of your station. You have your radio that's here. You have your computer that's running Winlink. Oftentimes the radio is running off of a 12-volt power system. Ideally, your computer is running off of that same 12-volt system. Otherwise, it's going to have some AC that's coming into its inverter, and then you've got the internet here. So what you really wanted is you've got all of these different systems that are here. This is all inside of your house. You've got AC going in, and then your house is connected to the commercial power. So the easiest way to be able to deal with the emergency backup power is to simply, inside of your house, upstream of where all of this equipment is sitting, plug in a universal power supply or a UPS, because this has a battery backup inside of it, and it will supply power to your computer. It'll supply power to your 12-volt supply. It'll also supply power to your internet router. And that's a piece that a lot of people forget about, because oftentimes you might lose power at your home, but your internet service provider, if you've got, say, cable modem, or you're still running on something like DSL or fiber, that internet connection is still going to be coming into your house unless the switching station has lost connectivity. So the two are independent of each other. So you want to make sure that you have these three systems, which are primarily the computer that's running Winlink Gateway, your 12 volts power supply, and your internet, all plugged into that UPS. Now, Dan, you had your gateway initially set up like this, and you ran into some issues. What happened?
Well, I really didn't have issues with it, but it's not the best way to do it. I run the power, the UPS, and I use that to charge the battery, and then the battery runs the equipment. A better way to do it is insert like a low loss power gate in there that quickly switches between the AC power and your DC power, rather than having the battery continuously charged. I still have mine set up this way, however. I haven't changed it over.
And you ran into an issue where you ended up on emergency power, and your UPS was only able to maintain your system for a certain amount of time. Is that correct?
Yeah, in that configuration, you're running the power supply, which can have a pretty high current draw. You're not directly running the equipment. So, and most UPSs are designed, the idea is it keeps your computer running long enough to gracefully shut down, and that's not necessarily a long time. So while it is a workable solution, it's probably not ideal.
And some other things to point out. So what Chris is showing on the screen there is very similar to what I have set up in my house, but you have to insert some things and remove some things. So, in the picture here, we show, you show the computer as a monitor, and often we think of that's the computer as the monitor, but you really need to separate out the two depending on how you have it set up. I have a couple gateways that are set up actually run as off of laptop, right? So that has a battery, and yes, that's plugged into the UPS. So when the UPS dies, it'll run off the laptop battery for a while. But if you have, and I have another one that's set up in another location that has a B-Link PC and a monitor. Well, the monitor is not plugged into the UPS because I don't need the monitor. In fact, most of the time, the only time I actually plug a monitor into that little B-Link computer that's running that gateway is when I need to do maintenance on it. And most of the time I remote into it through another tool. So I don't want a monitor plugged into the UPS because it's just going to drain off power that's not needed, right? Because you don't need the monitor to run the device. The device hopefully should just be running on its own all the time. As Dan stated, for the setup that's behind me here, the gateway that I have set up behind me, the UPS is plugged into the power supply. The power supply is charging the battery. When the UPS dies, yes, it will stop charging the battery, but the battery is plugged into the radio. and the radio is going to continue running while that battery goes. The laptop is going to continue running off its battery until that goes. And I have another UPS inside the house that runs my my internet stuff. So we've had a couple power losses here in the last 2 years since I've had it up and running, and I get about 6 hours of backup time when the power fails. Now I'm in a location where it rarely happens. You know, I've lived in this house for 20 years, and I can think of maybe less than 10 times in those 20 years where we've had a power outage that lasts longer than 20 minutes, right? Most of the time it's a quick little brownout. And because you have the UPS, the brownout doesn't affect your gateway. And because I have it on my internet, it doesn't affect my internet. If I were in a situation in the old house I lived in before here, we'd have power out all the time. I would be using a much bigger UPS. And I'd be using a much bigger battery, and I'd probably have some other solution for my laptop, like a 12-volt adapter to run off the battery as well, so that I'd have a longer amount of time, you know, and instead of using like a 20 amp hour battery, I'd put it on a 100 amp hour battery, or like I have a couple 185 amp hour batteries. That'd run a day or more. So it really depends on like how hard do you need it to be? How long do you need it to last? What's the situation you're going to be in? Again, at my house, it'd be overkill to put that 100 amp hour battery here because we rarely have the power out for an extended period of time. When we had it go down last time, somebody ran into a telephone pole. How often does that happen? And when it happened, it you know, took out power in the area for an amount of time it took for them to fix that telephone pole. So
one of the disadvantages of living as I do and you do, where the power supply is pretty stable, is you don't make the effort, or you, in my case, well, I'll get to it someday. It's not critical. But then when you do have a long outage, we had one 4 or 5 years ago, and we were out. I was out for about 8 hours, but a lot of the people around me were out for more than 24. And to be totally honest, I'm not prepared for that. You know, if that happens, then my gateways are going to go down, and I'd like to be better prepared for that.
Yeah, so. And exactly, Dan. And it is really, you know, things go really well until they don't go well. And I would be dragging out the generator and solar panels if I really needed it. But the reality is, at the point where I'm going to drag out the generator or big batteries that I keep topped off all the time, and a, you know, 2 or 3 kilowatt power inverter, I'm going to be thinking about my refrigerator and my freezer, not my gateway.
You know, when I look at the setup that I have here, I've done this initial setup. That's what I first had set up. And then I went ahead and off of this one UPS, I have, because all of this stuff is downstream of one single point, I have the option of being able to plug in my personal power generator, or I can change off of commercial power at that point. I can move one plug over, and this whole chain then stays on that setup. And that has worked pretty well for me for a long time. This is what we set up when we were out in the field, and we set up as the solar powered gateway. Instead of having a power generator that was out there, we used a battery power, and we were recharging the batteries off of the solar. So that ended up looking something like this, where we had our primary battery that was a 60 amp hour battery that was connected into the solar charge controller. This bottom port here is a link out to the solar panels. And then we were passing that power directly into a 12-volt power management system. In this case, it's the Buddy Pole Power Plus. And this unit is absolutely amazing. They're a little hard to get a hold of because they don't have them in stock very often. But this unit here not only will take that first primary DC power source, which in this case we're running it off of that primary battery, but it'll have a second battery that you can plug into it. And here we had a second 60 amp hour battery that was plugged into that. So we had constant charging that was coming in from the solar panels, and then we had that other battery. Now, when we look at that from a higher level here, we then start to switch things around if it's now running at our home. So here's again my radio and the gateway that's sitting out here. I have that whole power management setup that you just saw that's plugged into this, and that's what's driving my B-Link, which is the PC that's here. As David was saying, I don't run a monitor attached to it. It's just the 12-volt station that's running off of it. So both my radio and the gateway itself and all of the associated equipment is running on 12 volts right off of that power management system. It's got a large battery, a 60 amp hour or an 80 amp hour battery that's hooked into it. What's driving the most of the power, though, for this is the 12-volt power supply that's here, and that's also got my internet backup at that point on it. That's all downstream of my UPS, which I can then immediately change between commercial power and the generator power. At my place, I even have a second UPS that the first one plugs into. So I've daisy chained those out to I can start hearing the alarms go off in series. And I know when the first alarm goes off, I've got so much time before the second alarm that of what the UPS is going to hold in order for me to get my generator out if it's not already rigged and get it switched over to emergency power. Being I have this setup like this, if I needed to operate on an even more extended period of time, let's say we're going to run out of fuel or something, because everything is downstream of this power management system, that's when I'd be able to deploy solar panels, maybe out in the backyard, run the cabling inside and switch off of the 12-volt power supply and plug directly in. At that point, I'm running in, I'm being able to pass traffic more over RF as opposed to just passing it over the internet. But even at that point, I do have options for being able to plug in a variety of different hotspots to get the internet connection back up if need be. So these are just this is the thought process that you need to think through when you're thinking about emergency power. Here we're describing all of this in terms of operating a gateway and making sure we can keep our gateway on the air and serviceable. But really, for any operator who needs to be able to operate for an extended period of time, this thinking through this process of how do you maintain power, what's your pace plan, what's your primary source of power, what's your how do you back that up, working through the various different pace plans. And we've talked about that over the past couple of shows as well. So,
Chris, another consideration is, how likely is it that you're going to be home when something happens? It's kind of unique. The three of us spend a lot of time at home. I'm retired, and Chris and David both work significantly from home. So the odds that we would be home when a power failure occurs are pretty high, but that's not true for everybody. So that's a part of the equation you have to consider. Are you going to be able to come home and make changes to keep your equipment going? Or is it likely it's going to have to, continue without you?
That's a great point, Dan. Hey, if any of you found any of this information helpful throughout, please go ahead and add a like to the video, especially out on our YouTube channel. It really helps the content be shared to other operators. If you have additional questions that you want us to take in on the next coffee bar, go ahead and use this form. It's up all the time, cq.wavetalkers.com. And the next time we do a coffee bar episode, we'll see all of those questions. We also periodically check into these questions, and we'll oftentimes do an entire episode about one of the questions that comes in on this forum. So thanks a lot there. Let me jump back over to the walk-up and let's do a final check of our check-ins that have come in. We'll come up here to the Winlink check-in. If you haven't had a chance to send in your Winlink check-in, go ahead and do so now. I'll click the start. I've been checking throughout to make sure we've downloaded all of that traffic. We'll do one more check here. It looks like we've gotten them all. We'll come back over here to the top and we're going to click on the little globe icon. We bring that up. Here you're able to select which form that you would like to check and map. So if you haven't received check-in forms from other operators, but you want to see how this mapping feature works, just go ahead and select on the messages icon option here, and that will allow you to map all of your messages that you've received into your Winlink account, just like I'm going to do here with the Winlink check-in form. So I'm going to come down here to Winlink check-in v5. I'll select that. I'm going to hit the display map icon. And we're zoomed here into Southern California, and I can see that Logan, KD6LLB, sent in a check-in. We've got a few other operators, Eric and Carolyn and Craig, a few others out here, KN6LOA, and we've got KI7H. QA also here in the Southern California region. You notice some of these are showing up here in purple. If I go up to set filters, we can see that these stations are sending in their traffic via VHF or VARA HF. I'll go and leave that set to save, and I'm going to blow this out to full screen, and we're going to go ahead and zoom out for a global view of all of the check-ins that have come in. I'll right-click and drag over, and all of these stations that are showing up here in purple are all ones who have sent in their traffic via VHF or VARA FM at this point. So there's Terry Z01HOG. We also have Victor Kilo 2, Sierra Kilo Yankee joining us from the Sydney area. Thanks a lot for joining us from there. We've got Sierra Mike 7, Yankee Tango November joining us from Sweden. Hey, thanks a lot. And also sending in your traffic via VHF. I'll roll over these other stations here that are also coming in via VHF as well, so we can bring those up on screen. Get one more up here in the upper Midwest. And let me go ahead and switch the filter while we've got this up here. I'm going to change, instead of VHF, I'm going to say, show me all of the HF stations. If I can click on that, it would be good. There we go. VARA HF, or HF, and then we'll select VARA HF as well. And we'll go ahead and hit save. And now the map should automatically update for us. If I can click, I'd be dangerous. Come on. There it goes. And you can see that those purple notices change over. It looks like Terry sent it in both ways, both HF and VHF. Let me go ahead and zoom in a little bit here. We'll zoom into North America, right-click and drag with that in order to pan that map over. And it looks like we've got a few more traffic that has been sent in via HF at this point. Let me roll over these other stations. Everybody can see that we did get their check-ins here on Mother's Day right now. It's here in May. So thanks a lot, everybody, for joining us. Hopefully folks are being able to spend some time with their mothers, their family, if they are available at this time. Let's come up here. We're going to roll over each of these top ones here and just make sure everybody's able to see all of the stations that did send in their traffic. Roll over these down in this area up here, and another one here coming in via HF, KN6 Victor Juliet Whiskey. So, hey, thanks a lot for setting in your check-ins. It's great to see everybody joining us. Let me bring the guys back up here, and we'll do a quick go around and get any closing thoughts that anyone has. David, let's start with you, W0DHG.
Yeah, you know, I love every once in a while to have the pressure lifted of doing a coffee bar. We don't have to do a ton of planning, and we get to answer some questions live from you folks out there in the audience. I love to be able to do that kind of service. I'd love to get more information to you, or know more about what you guys want to know. So keep bringing it to us, and keep thinking about the challenges. Bring them up, and we'll try to figure them out and solve them for you.
Thanks, Dan, NR6V.
Well, I love these not only because it's a little less pressure on everybody, but I love them because I always learn something. You know, we do some research, and we do look into these and come up with a plan. And I almost always learn something, or maybe not learn something, but think about something in a different way. And I always like that.
Yeah, likewise. It's always a treat for me. I always try and make sure I get this announcement out a little bit earlier in the week so that folks can get access to that form, start submitting the questions. And it's always a joy for me as well to open up that spreadsheet and start to see the types of questions that have come in, And also, I get to see at that point, if we haven't been in there for a while, to be able to see all of the other questions that have come in the meantime that someone else has submitted. Maybe somebody's watched this, our previous coffee bar episodes on YouTube or on our Facebook page or elsewhere, and they've seen that form, and they'll go ahead and submit the questions. It's like, wow, that's a really great question. Let me reach out to these folks, or we always talk about what's going on. So if you found the information useful, again, please go on and like the video, leave us a comment, let us know what you thought about it. And if you really found the information helpful, consider going on to wavetalkers.com. Use that buy us a coffee link. It really does help keep the lights on for us here. So if you're inside of our live Zoom audience, hang around. We will open up the mics and do the after party. If you ever want to join us for an after party, just be sure to go to wavetalkers.com. At the bottom of every page is a join us link. Go ahead and fill that out, and you'll get the one email that we send out each week, and you'll have the link to be able to join us here in the live Zoom. So with that, we'll say 7-3 to everybody, and we'll switch it over to the after party. Thanks a lot, everyone.
Thanks all. 7-3.